Thanks, my name's Tim. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Tim.
I would say this is proper AA. How do you know it's proper AA? It's just very few readings, just alcoholics talking. None of these signs on the front telling us what to think and do. No yellow card, no thing about primary purpose, nothing about medication, nothing about safeguarding, because whoever designed this table today trusts the people in the room to handle situations as they arise and use their common sense. AA, alcoholics, just alcoholics talking, not because any of us are saying anything particularly sensible, because none of us ever do. But as you say, it's not an intellectual academic exercise. Some sort of magic happens when a bunch of idiots come together and just explain what happened, and then we take a few steps. But psychologists probably laugh at what we do. It's not about advanced psychology in step work. Theologians laugh at our conceptions of God. And someone says to someone in AA, you can have any higher power you like. You can be a doorknob. It can be the number 19 bus. And everyone nods and says it's very good. A theologian wouldn't support that. There's magic happening here. So how does that happen? Because people create a nice, solid structure in which the wild animals can run around a little bit. And that's what we're doing here. My date of sobriety is the 24th of July, 1993. So I was young when I got sober. I don't often hear that brief excerpt from the Big Book, which I think introduces the section of stories, the 17 stories, I think, of people who, as they say, stopped in time. I think anyone that gets as far as having a story published in the Big Book, anyone that gets sober stopped in time. If you're not in time, you're dead, and that's the end of you. So we all stopped in time. My brother was an alcoholic, died up the road in Bolton, hanged himself as an alcoholic who was in AA, and it didn't work out, and he decided to take a different path. So he didn't stop in time. There we go. I always found that a profoundly patronising reading. I know I shouldn't criticise anything in the sacred Big Book, but I'm going to, just my view. So when it talks about, young people who avoided advanced alcoholism, and then it talks about the DTs and things like that, that's not advanced alcoholism, that's advanced drinking. There's a difference between drinking and alcoholism. Not everyone that drinks a skinful in Manchester city centre on a Saturday night is an alcoholic. It's not about the DTs. That's just a physical phenomenon which will flow from drinking enough alcohol every day for enough years. It is not alcoholism. The definition of alcoholism, if one wants the, as it were, quick and dirty definition of it, it's on page 44 of the Big Book. It gives you two conditions. Condition number one, I'll put this in my own language. Heaven forbid I should actually quote something from the wretched book, because that would be showing off. So I'm going to show off even more and paraphrase. How's that for showing off? If it gets really bad and you try and stop and you can't, and when you drink you're out of control, tick those two boxes, you're alcoholic. Boom, welcome to AA. So what would advanced alcoholism be? It talks also in the book about crossing a line. And the line is the line of being able to stop or moderate. Now, the first time I got properly drunk, or the first time I was allowed to drink what I wanted to drink, I got properly drunk and was sick. I lost control of the quantity that I drank from the get-go. I already crossed that line, straight out of the trap, boom. First test, passed. within a few weeks, I was getting into the most terrific trouble, waking up the next morning thinking, God, I really wish that would never happen again, but knowing there was no way I could stop it happening again. Because, yeah, I like drinking, but was there more to it than that? I recognised right from the start of my drinking as a teenager that I was now married to this, like it or not. And when I didn't like it, I was just as glued to it as when I liked it. So I wasn't doing it because I liked it. I did it because I was glued to it. So I was passing those two tests right at the beginning. I was therefore in an advanced stage of alcoholism right from the beginning. And it's so funny. It talks about we could see the bottom coming up and hitting us. I don't think coming into AA, certainly as far as I was concerned, was about seeing the truth. Because I saw the truth all the way along, thinking this is bloody awful, but there's nothing I can do about it. I might as well make the best of it. I'm clearly an alcoholic, so let's make myself comfortable in that role, as comfortable as I can be. But I had no desire to do anything about it, and I had no desire to be like other people. The world had nothing to offer me as far as I was concerned. Whatever it offered looked like fool's gold. So I thought, just settle into the character. I saw what I was doing. It wasn't an inability to see disaster impending. It wasn't an inability to see the doom. One day I suddenly saw the doom and then made a very sensible decision to join AA. No. For years, I had sufficient evidence on the basis of which a regular person of sound mind would conclude you want to stop that and there are people who can help you. One is aware, even if one doesn't know about AA, one is aware that in the world there are people that can help people. That's not news. One might not know how, but I didn't even start the journey of investigating what to do about it. So coming and joining AA was not because I got a very useful piece of information and put two and two together and made an intelligent, sensible decision and joined AA. That wasn't how it happened. I'll tell you how it happened. Sunday morning, I'd had an absolute skinful the night before. I was sick as a dog. I was waddling to the bathroom at about 10 a.m. and you'll remember this, the telephone table in the shared accommodation. Someone explained to the children what one of those is. You know those videos on YouTube, or the TikTok things, where they show a kind of dial phone to teenagers and see if they can work it, and they can't? Anyway, on the telephone table, there was a stack of yellow pages and telephone directories. And I don't know why I looked up alcohol in the yellow pages that day, but I did. I don't know why when I saw Alcoholics Anonymous, an organisation apparently I'd heard of, but I knew nothing about, with no desire to stop drinking or anything like that. And I called the number, and I didn't know anything about AA. And yet, I asked the question, is there a meeting in London today? I didn't have enough information to ask that question, but the question was given to me to ask. And then the woman said, there's a meeting in, I was living in Hampstead, the woman said, there's a meeting in Hampstead tonight at 8 o'clock. Don't drink between now and then. I had 10 hours and I was shaking and sweating and in a frightful condition. And I basically sat on the bed for 9 hours and toddled up the road to the meeting. I spoke to someone years later who'd been at my first meeting. He said, you look like a ghost. You looked as though you were halfway not there on this plane, halfway over to the other plane. Now, someone else told me not to drink, and remarkably, I didn't drink between the 10 o'clock in the morning and the 8 o'clock in the evening. Not one element of this story involves me taking information, doing something sensible with it, activating my reason, activating my willpower, and then forging ahead. This is that's what divine intervention looks like. If you suddenly find yourself taking a set of actions you couldn't even have conceived of 24 hours earlier, there has been an intervention. If not divine, what is it? It's something which is so like divine intervention, you might as well use the term divine intervention. In a sense, that's what divine intervention is. It's anything beyond the reasonable and the rational. And people have the most frightful difficulty sometimes with the spiritual side of the programme. I was boringly atheist. Some people are atheist in a sort of interesting way, because they've actually thought about it. Sometimes philosophers and theologians and former priests who are atheists, they're fascinating on the subject. But common or garden atheists, please. When I was new, someone said to me, so you've got an opinion about the existence of God? I said, well, yes, I have, and God doesn't exist. And they said, what have you read on the subject? Well, nothing. Oh, so in your great intellect, you don't even know everything about the material realm, but suddenly you're an expert on the metaphysical realm and what is in it and what isn't in it, and you're certain, and you have no direct access to it, you have no experience, you haven't read anything, you have no knowledge, but you've drawn a conclusion. Big old you. That was the problem when I was new. I was blind to what was obvious. And the fact is, from an early age, I was having experiences in the world where the membrane between this world and whatever lies beyond was thin enough to have experiences which defied belief. When I was 7, I had an experience where I heard a voice saying, "Run." And I started running, and I turned some corners, and I didn't know where I was running or why. And I ran to the door of a church, and I didn't know what to do because the church was shut. I didn't know why I'd run there. And I heard a little sound, and I put my ear up to the keyhole, and I thought I could hear someone crying or something. And so I found a grown-up, and they called the priest, and the priest opened up, and the old woman, in her 80s, who had locked herself inside the church, had fallen and broken her hip. And she had a very weak voice. It could only be heard if you'd had your ear up against the keyhole. Now, the truth is, that was one such experience that I'd remembered. And there were some others as well. But how many other such experiences where the metaphysical realm wants to find a way of communicating with us over here, but we don't notice and we think it's something else? Oh, it was luck. Oh, was it? The evidence is there if one's looking for it. And an acquaintance of mine, she was talking to a priest, and the priest said to her, "In the case for the existence of God, you, little missy, are exhibit A." And Jung, in the Big Book, talks about the fact that over the course of history, there have been individual instances of miracles of people, essentially people having these spectacular spiritual experiences which utterly change the way they look at themselves and the world. And I mean, even some of the saints, St. Francis of Assisi, if one knows about his story, but you know, a bit of a cad, and he'd be arrested and drugged now for the things that he did. But you look around AA, and it's a room full of people who've had these miraculous experiences. It's not just happening through odd little interventions here or there. We've been given the system to make it happen, and that's the remarkable thing. My alcoholism is very straightforward. Left to my own devices, I'll drink, and if I drink, I might never stop. The only thing stopping me, it says alcohol is cunning, baffling, and powerful. Alcohol is that, Bill is using a literary device there. I won't go into the details. But what he means is not that alcohol is doing anything, but the thought of a drink inside the brain of the alcoholic is cunning, baffling, and powerful. And of course, we use the phrase to explain what it was like, what happened, and what it is like now. And of course, one must explain the it. But the actual line is, in the big book, is to say what I was like, what happened, and what I am like now. Because it is the I that is the problem. It is not the it that is the problem. My whole problem was that I was deflecting attention from the I onto the it. And every time I had a negative feeling for years into recovery, I thought the negative feeling was caused by you or him or her or Susan or Bobby or the situation or the country or the Conservative Party or whatever it was. There was a reason, but it wasn't me. I was never the problem. As soon as I became the problem, I started to be able to find a solution. But the chief problem with me is that when a thought occurs to me, this is, as it were, before recovery, the real recovery process. When a thought would occur to me, I would believe it. Why? Because it was my thought. And that is the core of my alcoholism. Ordinary people have irrational thoughts the whole time, but are able to stand back from them with a degree of critical distance and say, well, am I going to do that or am I not going to do that? Am I going to push them down the stairs? Probably not, or at least not today. With me, when I have a thought in my pre-recovery state, or when I relapse back into my pre-recovery mental state, if I believe something, it's true. If I feel something, it's real. If I want to do something, it's good for me. If I want to say something, I have to. And none of these are real and none of these are true. The purpose of recovery is to put a gap between me and my own thinking. A friend of mine says you get 1 second of reprieve for every year of recovery. And I think that's about right. I was on the phone to a doctor's surgery many years ago, and the doctor's surgery was not being as cooperative as I thought they ought to be in securing for me my elderly, very elderly mother's medical records, which were needed with some urgency. And the rudeness of the poor woman who was obviously having a bad day was so breathtaking. I had to pause, and because I had like 27 years of recovery at that time, I was pausing. I was pausing for so long, apparently 20 seconds. She thought I'd hung up, and she hung up first. And that's the sign that the pause has worked. The only danger, if you're in one of those sort of great pauses, those great dramatic silences, as long as people don't think you're dead and bury you, you're all right. But the ability to pause, the ability not to react, the ability to simply stare dumbfounded at the person and what they've said and just wait for the next thing to happen has saved my life more times than I can count. But the chief thing, that pause, the ability to pause, is not something I've constructed at home. It's not something I make myself. It is a reprieve which is given to me. It talks about that daily reprieve on page 85 of the big book that we get from having completed the first 9 steps and then living in the last 3. And the completion of the first 9 steps, to run through that very briefly. Step 1 as I said, says that left to my own devices, I will drink because I'm obeying myself. Step 2, there is a way out of this. Step 3, the way out means dethroning myself as the chief pot and bottle washer of my life, dethroning myself as the captain of knowing things, dethroning myself as the most important counsel in my life, and saying, I'm just an ordinary operative, shop floor. My job is to go to God every day and say, what do you want me to do? That's it. What do you want me to do? And simply do that. With no thought of the past, no thought of the future, no thought of other people, no thought of the world. Just stick to the knitting, stick to what is in front of me. Step 4 is a catalogue of how I created, as other people have referred to, I created my own depression and anxiety. I'll tell you the secret. This is worth its weight in gold. I was depressed because I persistently thought depressing thoughts. Does that make sense? Does that nod slowly if that there we go. I felt anxious because I was thinking anxious thoughts. It's a whole system which you can apply to anything. My depression and anxiety were not states I was in, or things that were happening to me, or things created by brain chemistry, or any of those other things. They were habits I was performing, and I'd been performing being depressed and anxious for so long. It became, I thought, who I was, like these actors in Corrie that can't get out of character. It's the same thing. You forget who you are and you become the character. And I learnt in AA very simply how not to think depressing thoughts, how not to think anxious thoughts, how to think different thoughts instead. And then how to take... Now, I think one of you referred to the word philosophy. Absolutely one needs a philosophy, but the philosophy then needs to be applied. And so the rest of it is a programme of action. So having catalogued the catastrophe of how I'd been living and shared it with a board sponsor in step 5. And I made some very bad apologies, but I made them. They're as spiritual acts, not social acts. The job then is to live in 10, 11 and 12, which means the most important thing in my life is carrying this message to other alcoholics. Don't tell my other half that that's the most important thing. Although I think he'd probably agree, because he recognises that I need God to stay sober, to have God keep me sober. I need to be working for God in AA. And it doesn't mean I don't get to have an occupation. I have an occupation and a home and a marriage and a this and a that. I'm just like an ordinary person. But they're not the purpose of my life. There is something, I think, arguably slightly different about alcoholics, except for the alcoholism. There's something else. There's a general dissatisfaction with ordinariness. I think one needs a little bit more. I don't know if that is engendered by the alcohol and the drugs themselves, that they create this sort of vacuum which then must be filled by something, or whether it's pre-existing, who knows. But anyway, there's a great AA speaker called Don P. who would say that an ordinary 9-to-5 existence just isn't going to cut it for your regular AA member. You need something more. What is the more? And the more is working with other alcoholics. Now, sometimes it takes the form of sponsorship in the formal sense of, I am the sponsor and you're the sponsee. But sponsorship is a far broader notion, I think. It is simply sharing what has worked for me in the presence of other people in the hope that they will imitate. It's the monkey see, monkey do principle. And that can be done in 1,000 ways. It's possible to sponsor people formally and not really be doing the job at all. And it's possible not to be sponsoring anyone formally, but to be sponsoring hundreds or thousands of people through the demonstration of the principles, and simply how one shares, how one carries oneself can have a very profound impact. But when that becomes the most important thing, the rest of my life takes care of itself. And fully trust that God is completely in charge of the course of my life. I need not worry about anything. I'm being carried safely down the river. All I need to do is make sure I don't jump out of the boat. That's all I have. Thank you very much.